I'm Kenneth Branagh. Join me for Jeremy Isaacs' landmark documentary, Cold War, next Sunday on CNN. The Cold War is recent history. For some of us, the events in this series are memories, part of growing up under the threat of a global war and nuclear holocaust. For others of us, much of what we'll see in the programs will be revelatory and new, and all of it will be fair and accurate. All of our scripts and programs were reviewed by historians from the United States, Great Britain, and the former Soviet Union. They were the arbiters of fact over remembrance.
You really do get the chicken and the egg.
I knew that any history series that claimed the authority that Cold War would certainly claim had to have built into it the knowledge and expertise and judgment of some of the great historical minds of our day who are experts on the Cold War, because quite frankly, people that make television programs are not experts on anything, usually.
When we were developing the project, we felt the need to plug into the latest historical thinking. What are the top historians on the Cold War? What were they saying? How did they view the Cold War? How were they interpreting the new evidence that was coming in from what had been the Soviet Union, from East Europe, from China? We then met with the National Security Archive in Washington, who were using the Freedom of Information Act to get information out of the American government.
Here at the archive, we file probably 1,000 to 1,500 Freedom of Information requests every year. We track those through all the agencies like Central Intelligence Agency, State Department, Defense Department. We file lawsuits when the government stonewalls, and once we get the documents released, then we index them and publish them on the web, on CD-ROM, and books, and on microfiche. To most Freedom of Information requesters, they'll get this, and they'll go away. And the reason the National Security Archive exists is so we don't go away. We persist, we file an appeal, we threaten a lawsuit, and ultimately, we'll get most of this document released. In fact, we'll probably get all of it released.
The National Security Archive suggests to us that they brief us, they provide us a background for each episode that we're making. Because as a program maker, when you join a team like this, you have to become an expert in something in a matter of weeks. So they would prepare for us a set of briefing documents for each episode. These would contain copies of articles, extracts from books. They would contain original documents, papers that maybe weren't easily available, that hadn't been published. They would contain a chronology. And with these briefing books, and believe me, there were 2, 3, sometimes 4 of these great documents, the size of a telephone directory, that we had for each program.
This, for example, is the briefing paper, the biography of Mikhail Gorbachev, that was given to Ronald Reagan in preparation for Reagan's first meeting with Gorbachev. And they talk about Gorbachev's charismatic leadership and why he's different from all the other leaders. And it's a secret document that ordinarily wouldn't have been seen for 30 or 40 more years. Here's some of the Russian documents preparing Gorbachev for his first meeting with Reagan and then reporting on the summit that they had. And what you get from this is you get what each side thought the other was going for. And you can see that in the documents. And then Jeremy and his team would use those documents to go back and interrogate Gorbachev's aides, Reagan's aides.
But you need the socioeconomic dynamic.
Right, that's what's missing, I
particularly
think.
at the beginning of this, to show people why
His hunt was
that the guy was supposed to be assassinated.
killed in time for the Bay of Pigs. And the script for Backyard, which is a show we've just been looking at to do some comments on. We sent them the briefing book for that probably 7 months ago. In September, they sent us the rough script and a rough cut of the interviews. We sit down and look at the tape with the script. We say, oh, that fact's wrong. Or, that came from that source, and that's not the best source. I'd use this source.
Part of the problem here is that she's a survivor of the El Mozote massacre, but this is not footage from that massacre.
This is in the city.
This is in the city.
We have to get approval at 3 separate stages from 3 very, very tough-minded, critical historical advisors, John Gaddis and Vlad Zubok and Lawrence Friedman, and
great power politics.
you know, they are hard men to please.
We have assembled the best production team I think you could find anywhere in the world. And walking through the production office in London is a little bit like walking through the United Nations, because you're bound to hear languages on every side as film researchers are speaking with the people in the countries where we're going.
I think London's distance between both Washington and Moscow is actually significant, and I think it has helped us. I mean, we pay a special attention to making sure that we really do get the Russian viewpoint.
Well, it's a continuing frustration to try to be fair to all sides. There may be more than two sides. There were people of Eastern Europe, there were Germans, people of Latin America, people who were dragged into the Cold War by the rivalry between the superpowers. I must say that I'm impressed very much with the willingness of the London team to take my advice, for instance, into account, or the perspective of Russia in general.
I think the series is about portraying things objectively and as a balanced opinion as possible. But there is no one version of history. It just doesn't exist.
The time had come to try and go beyond those stereotypes and to understand what really happened and why it happened, and that might actually mean that we'll suddenly realize that a lot of it is the matter of perception and misperception, suspicions on both sides.
The Soviet Union felt naked, unprotected, surrounded everywhere by American nuclear forces.
You know, isn't it time that we made him understand we don't really care whether they like us or not? We want to be respected.
The Americans were aggressors who wanted to conquer the whole world, and we had to protect the world.
We felt that they were trying to take over the world, and actually we were one of their largest stumbling blocks in that effort. Therefore, we were one of their primary enemies, and their primary target was to take over our country.
It didn't even cross our minds that the Americans were scared of us. We thought that we had something to be frightened of, because they were capitalists, and that was something terrible for us. We believed that they sucked the blood of the workers.
There is a real void, a gap in people's ability to understand what went on in the Russian psyche. Why were the Russians so worried?
For many Americans, the Cold War was necessary. They believed the Cold War was necessary to contain ungodly communism, Stalin's expansionism, to make the world safe for democracy and capitalism. For the Russians, most of them, the Cold War was unnecessary, and they still view it as a totally tragic, unnecessary event that thwarted their post-war reconstruction, forced them to waste immense resources on arms race, and of course they lost the Cold War in the end, so that confirmed them that the whole thing was something that the national history suffered from.
Once upon a time, there lived two neighbors. One of them bought a shotgun. Aha, thought the other. All right, I'll buy myself a bigger gun. What could this mean, thought the first neighbor. I'll buy myself something bigger.